We're here again for another informational session on some, less well-known survival topics. And the subject I wanted to cover today was something that not very many people talk about, and is something you have to do in the woods all the time. It's basically how to shit in the woods. Put it simply, we're going to talk about a lot of different techniques and uses of different plants in order to, effectively have a good environment of hygiene for your body. There's a lot of stuff out there you don't want to use, especially poisonous stuff. Things that have slick coatings on them, and we're just going to cover, several different issues when having to take a dump in the woods, so hang tight. Alright, so the first thing that we need to talk about when addressing, hygiene and having a latrine in the wilderness is placement of where you're going to have a latrine or where you're going to use the bathroom in the woods, because this can become very important in certain areas of the country, especially if you're in bear country. It can literally mean life or death where you put your latrine, because you don't want to attract unwanted predators into your area. So at a bare minimum, your latrine needs to be at least 300 yards downwind of the area that your camp is set up. If you're just making a quick stop, you need to make sure that you bury your waste, not only for non-pollution of the land, but for a lot of different reasons. If you're in a longer term, living situation, expedition, whatever, you need to make sure that your latrine is not uphill to where the waste matter could get into the water table and infect your water supply. So remember bear country, and remember not to have it in a downhill area where it'll run off. So the next thing we're going to cover is smooth rocks, so hang on. My absolute favorite thing for basically wiping my butt in the woods is a smooth rock. And I know that sounds a little bit crazy, because believe me, I get a lot of looks when I tell people in classes that you want to wipe your butt with what? But believe it or not, this method works better than any other I've found, other than maybe a few hairy plants that have some astringent type nature to them. But the great thing about this is you get it a little bit wet, and it's got kind of a scrubbing action that gets, all the stuff that you want to get out of there out. And you just wash the stone off several times, and you really won't get a much cleaner feel than this. It's almost like taking a shower. The one downside is that you usually have to take your pants off in order to, get properly cleaned without having, your pants get wet. But this is my number one top method, and we're going to talk about hairy plants next. The next most important thing on the countdown is definitely got to be any type of plant that has a hairy texture to it. You don't have to get specific with species types, even though I do have two favorites. Mullein and French mulberry, also known as American beautyberry, are my two favorite, primitive toilet papers as far as leaves is concerned. But anything that has a really hairy texture will really do well by you, because it's not about it's just like toilet paper. When you look at toilet paper, you got your Scott brand, and then you got your fluffy with ridges type brands that are more expensive, your Charmins. And which ones work better? The Scott definitely does not work better. So you want to look for things that have a really good texture to it. Mullein's extremely hairy, and the thing I really love about French mulberry is that it's got kind of almost an antimicrobial type substance in it. So not only does it have a good texture when you wipe, it also helps keep you clean and hygienic. The one thing that you definitely want to stay away from is any kind of leaf that has a slick outer coating on it. Oak leaves, things of that nature, are basically just going to smear stuff around, so they don't work too well. So I definitely leave that out of your arsenal. There's just so many different types of plants. I'll just list a couple of pictures after this clip to give you an idea, but just remember, anything with a hairy texture works wonderful. Alright, so the next most important thing on the countdown here is it definitely got to be grass. Grass is probably one of the most abundant things on Earth. Well, it is the most abundant plant on earth, and it is, all over the place. You need to find long tufts of it, though. That's the one thing. You can't use short grass. It needs to be longer, and you need to make sure it's not the stickier kind, like Johnson grass or something like that that has those rough edges. Sawgrass, all those different types. But basically, you want to just have long tufts of it, and you want to break it in the middle and then roll it over on itself so that it's pretty firm, so that when you wipe it, it's not bending over on itself and so forth. So grass is definitely, top three choices. So throw that into your arsenal, and we're going to move on to some of the other ones. The next plant I want to talk about is the Bodark plant, also known as Osage orange. And the reason I like this plant, I actually came across this little technique having to come off the deer stand in the middle of winter when everything was just completely dead. And you have horse apples. Everybody's pretty much heard of horse apples. They're just large, almost kind of neon green balls in the forest that most animals don't mess with. And they have almost like a corn cob texture to them. That's what makes them so great. But the one thing that you need to be mindful of is make sure that they're not broken open, so that almost kind of milky latex sap gets out, because if that gets on you, it can potentially cause a rash. But the texture and the ridges in the horse apples work phenomenally. They're just like corn cobs, just like the pioneers used to use. So wintertime, that's probably my favorite. Definitely, last but not least, the most important thing that we need to know about in the woods is any kind of poisonous plants that are going to cause dermatitis. You don't want to go grabbing something that is going to cause you a rash or might be slightly poisonous. So, be mindful of poison ivy, poison sumac, poison oak, trumpet creeper. There's just a ton of different things out there that can give you a rash that you need to be mindful of. You also don't want to use plants like water hemlock. Certain really toxic plants can absorb through your skin. Just touching them, can cause problems. So you need to be mindful and know the different plants to look out for. Alright, the last thing that I want to talk about is probably one of the most important as far as comfort is concerned. You need to find a place where you can squat comfortably, especially if you are going to be there longer periods of time. Maybe you got diarrhea, whatever. You want to find a good blown over log. That's probably my favorite thing to use. Something you can just kind of hang your ass off the back end and still be comfortable. This is a really good one because it's got a backrest. You won't always find one of those. Normally you just find some kind of blown over log, but this is my favorite method. There's definitely other ways to do it. You can always lean up against a tree, but you better have pretty strong leg muscles if you want to do that. But this is just one of the many techniques that you can use, and there's so much stuff to learn out here as far as bushcraft is concerned, whether it be hygiene, making shelters, or whatever. But we'd appreciate any kind of commentary on any kind of plant life that you've used, or methods and techniques. So drop us a line in the box down there, and please help support us by subscribing. That's we go out shooting these videos all the time, just for your educational purposes. And tell your friends, tell your buddies about what we're doing, and hit that subscribe button. Thanks for